So Paul George absolutely shocked the basketball world a little bit over 24 hours ago when he told the Indiana Pacers that he's actually going to be leaving next summer in free agency. This is absolutely crazy because nobody figured that Paul George wasn't going to be re-signing with the team that plays in the same conference as LeBron James' Cavaliers with absolutely no help to beat them within the next 3 or 4 years. Okay, so really there's no surprises here. We're only a year out from Paul George actually being a free agent, but with all the rumors we've heard in the last 24 hours, it really feels like George is a free agent this summer, because there's an amazing chance that he's not going to start the season in an Indiana Pacers jersey, and there's an even better chance that he's not going to be there by February if he somehow survives this summer there. With George telling the Pacers that he's not coming back, this pretty much started a Paul George fire sale, and in the last 24 hours on Twitter, I've seen so many rumors about this team is talking for Paul George, and this team engaged in trade talks, and this team is offering these players for Paul George, and it's just really just everywhere right now. So where is George actually going to end up, and where does he best fit? Well, this is pretty interesting because a little bit earlier in the year I made a video about Paul George's next move in his career, and I really thought that his next move was with the Celtics. I think the idea in Boston is that eventually one day Danny Ainge is going to stop stockpiling draft picks and he's going to turn him into a star. At least that's what we hope. And I really thought the star was going to be Paul George until I saw him on the Jimmy Kimmel Live show chopping it up with Jimmy Kimmel, and basically you could tell he wanted to play for the Lakers. He was smiling, he couldn't say much because he's under contract, and you can't really do that when you're an NBA player, but he basically did everything except say, I want to play for the Lakers next season. At first I had refused to believe it because I just couldn't figure out why he wanted to be a Laker so bad other than the fact that he's from around there. I really thought he was gonna want more of a win now situation, but it seems like he's just hell-bent on playing for the Lakers, and who knows, maybe Magic Johnson can put a contender around him, and in a few years they're contending, he's the star of the team, he's playing in LA, and I can't think of anything sweeter than playing basketball in Los Angeles, and he's from around there, so maybe that's just the dream, to play for a legendary franchise in your hometown and be on a championship team, and he might get that one day, who knows. But unless Paul George is willing to just ignore every single other factor and he just wants to go straight for LA, there could be some factors that are going to stop that, because essentially what Paul George did yesterday was created a fire sale for him, because he told the Pacers, I'm not coming back. So now the Pacers are in a situation where they have to trade him or he's walking that summer for nothing, and they know that. So to me that means Indiana, they can't be too greedy about what they get for him, because it's either get something or get nothing. So no matter what that something is, I'm sure Indiana probably wants it. Now, of course, you have to draw a line there. I don't think they want somebody like Tristan Thompson in his horrible contract, but they need something because there's not going to be a star in Indiana for a long time after Paul George just walks out. So understandably, there's been a lot of talks with a lot of different teams for Paul George because he's that type of player, especially if you're a contending team. If you're right on that edge, Paul George could really tip the scale in your favor. So it seems like teams are willing to take that risk, that even if he's a rental, we want to get him and try to convince him to stay here. And that is what I'm looking at. That might be a tiny bit of a problem for LA because they clearly have interest in each other. But here's what I'm looking at. So you have a team like the Cavaliers who have no kind of cap space, but they're still in the Paul George sweepstakes because they just got beat by Golden State. They know they have to get better, and they're really trying to get somebody because they know LeBron James probably won't hesitate to leave in a year if he figures that's what he has to do. So if Cleveland can find some way in hell to get Paul George, no matter who they have to trade, I've already said I think Love has to be a part of that trade. If they can find a way to get George there, they go to the NBA Finals. I think at that point, if they traded Love, they're still probably not good enough to beat the Warriors, but we have to see how they fill the rest of the roster out. But if that happens, you have to ask the question, is Paul George going to leave a championship situation where he can win every year or have a chance to win every year in Cleveland? Is he going to leave something like that to go play with the Lakers, who may or may not have made the playoffs by that point? And that's how this fire sale kind of makes life a bit difficult for Los Angeles, because for a minute there it seemed like the Lakers were in a sweet spot. It was originally reported that George told the Pacers he's leaving and he prefers joining the Lakers. So at that moment, from the Lakers perspective, it's like, okay, well, we don't need to make a trade for this guy this year because they're stockpiling assets, they're in the draft right now, they look like they're going to have a lot of good young pieces. Why trade any of those pieces for Paul George this season when you have him wanting to come there next summer and you can just throw him on top of what you have? That's the best situation, that's the ideal situation. But I'm interested to see how long LA plays that card, because what if he does get traded to a championship situation? Do you really trust that he loves LA that much to go ahead and leave somebody like Cleveland to go play there? And while we're on that subject, how does he fit with Cleveland, and does he fit with Cleveland? Because I know that Cleveland is now, I don't know about moved on, but they've been in talks about Jimmy Butler too. And I find that interesting because right now Paul George plays the small forward position. If he goes to the Cavaliers, he's more than likely going to be playing shooting guard, which he can do because that's what he was playing before he moved to the small forward position. But I still have my questions about a team featuring Kyrie Irving, LeBron James, and Paul George. I know they need to make something up because clearly this roster can't compete with the Warriors, But is that going to be a good team? Because Kyrie Irving definitely needs the ball to be effective. Paul George is going to need the basketball. LeBron James is going to need the basketball. He's a facilitator, but he still needs it. And when you look at traditional big threes, you really don't see 3 ball handling players together. It's always like 2 ball handling players and a big man, or something like you have in Golden State right now, where you have Curry and KD as the ball handlers, Klay Thompson is a spot up shooter, and then you have Draymond Green, he's a power forward. I don't know if you really call him a big man, but he doesn't need the ball to be effective all the time. He can do other things. And then on top of that, how does that really help them compete with Golden State? Because I had said this during the series and even before it, that it wasn't such a talent disparity between Cleveland and Golden State. It was that Cleveland had too many loose ends on defense to keep up with them. So you picked up guys like Kyle Korver and Darren Williams, who were important on offense. Well, kind of, not in the finals, but they were supposed to be important on offense, but then they were definitely liabilities on defense. So Paul George addition doesn't fix that. It just kind of hopefully assures that LeBron James doesn't leave next summer. Now, I do have to mention that Paul George plays great defense, so in the event that he's on the Cavaliers, obviously you like the idea of him and LeBron switching trying to guard Kevin Durant. Nobody's ever going to stop KD, but that gives you a better option than whoever else they had on KD anytime LeBron wasn't on him. Now, in the miracle situation that somehow Cleveland finesses Indiana for Paul George without giving up Kevin Love, then you can look at it and say that their offense might be overwhelming, much in the same way Golden State's is. But I'm not even going to dive into that because I just don't even see how that would be possible. I don't really need to discuss much about how he would fit in with the Celtics because I've talked about it before. He slides right into the small forward position. There's no problem where he's going to have to share the ball with too many offensive players because you have Isaiah Thomas there and he's pretty much the ball handling scorer there right now. And if they were somehow able to work out a situation where they were able to get him and they were able to get Blake Griffin this summer from free agency, then they're right there contending with the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, I don't think that's going to happen because, again, we're looking at this assuming that Paul George is probably a rental. And we've already seen Boston turn down a trade for Paul George back in February when they could have had him, but the asking price was way too high. And now you look at it, and Danny Ainge is clearly focused on the future with the move he just made to get even more picks. When they had the first pick, he turned that into a 3rd pick and more picks for the future. So I highly doubt he's going to be turning those assets into what could be a rental, because then you really screw the franchise. You give away your assets and the star you were supposed to get doesn't even stay. So I don't see this happening anymore. But if Paul George for some reason had a change of heart and just said he wants to be in a contending situation and he's not so serious about going to LA, he'd be a beautiful fit for Boston because right now they need somebody solid who can score and defend at the smaller forward position. Jay Crowder's decent, but obviously he's not a guy who's creating his own shot like George, and then they need somebody at the power forward position. So that could be the start of something big there, but sadly I don't see it happening. And then there's the one that I saw emerge tonight, and apparently the Wizards have been talking to the Pacers about acquiring Paul George, and like I said, everybody really is right now. But I think that's a great fit too, because you remember coming up to the end of the season, we really thought the Wizards were going to be the team that Cleveland played in the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't think a lot of us truly thought they were going to beat them, but we thought they had a chance because their pace was definitely giving the Cavaliers problems. Now, Paul George is the guy that they definitely need, or somebody like him. That's what the Wizards need right now to put them from that team that can just compete with Cleveland to the team that could finally actually dethrone them in the East. It really sucks for the Wizards that Otto Porter is now a free agent, because that would have been the perfect player to try to package with something else to send to Indiana for Paul George. The fact that he's a free agent, that's probably not going to happen now, but he's turning into a good player and that would have been good bait. And Paul George is an upgrade at that position, so you'll have what I think is the best point guard in the East. You'll have Bradley Beal, who is becoming a very good player. Then you have Paul George there, and that's the guy you need to match LeBron. He's not better than LeBron, but just to match him, that's what you need. If you watch a video I made ages ago about duos I think need to happen in the NBA, Paul George and John Wall was actually one of them. And that's another question I have for the Lakers right there. What if that situation ends up happening and the Wizards find a way to get Paul George? Is Paul George going to leave John Wall and Bradley Beal to go play for the Los Angeles Lakers? He fits perfectly there. He's playing with an elite point guard and a great shooting guard, and you've got a chance to go to the NBA Finals. You're going to throw that away just because you want to play in Los Angeles? I don't know Paul George personally, but that just doesn't really make sense to me. So aside from the teams that I've been talking about, and the Lakers, the Wizards, the Cavaliers, and the Celtics, I don't know where else realistically that Paul George would end up. There's teams that he fits beautifully with, like the Pelicans. Obviously they're in dire need of a guy like George because they've got DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis down there, and I think this season they were like playing D-League guys on their perimeter position, so they would love to have Paul George, but they have absolutely nothing to trade for him. I can't tell you what they would trade for him. Even Drew Holiday is a free agent right now, so there's really no way that's going to happen. And if he does get to free agency, he's got his eye set on LA apparently, so I just don't see that happening even though they need him. Although I've always said that I don't ever want to see another ball handling player with Russell Westbrook, I want to see a big man go to OKC, but still I think a lot of people would like to see Paul George and Westbrook just so Westbrook could have some help. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. Even that really can't happen because the Thunder right now, they've got some very questionable spending habits, and I think they've got like the third worst situation as far as cap space goes going into this summer and this season, and they don't have a lot of talent to show for it. They've got good players, but nobody that's really like that. They've got one all-star on the team, so Paul George to the Thunder is really never gonna happen. I did see one interesting piece of news that probably doesn't mean a whole lot in the scheme of things, but George did like a post on Instagram that talked about him going to the Miami Heat, and it had him photoshopped in a Miami Heat jersey. He hit like on that. Probably doesn't mean much because who wouldn't want to play in Miami? I've been to Miami before, and I'm telling you right now, if I could die and come back, I would work my entire life just so I could play basketball in Miami. I'm telling you. But we've already established that Paul George seems like he has his sights set on LA. I don't think Miami can put together a package good enough to even trade for him, and if he does end up hitting free agency, we've already established that he has his sights set on LA. Now again, Pat Riley has pulled off Magic before, so you never count him out, but they're not in one of my top destinations that he'll actually end up, but we'll just have to wait and see. To be honest, I could spend time going around the entire league and rationalizing the situation for Paul George to be there, but I think when we come back to reality, it's most likely going to be the Lakers or the Cavaliers, with the Celtics and the Wizards having like a dark horse chance, but I think it's kind of between Lakers and Cleveland right now. And even then, Cleveland has to make a hell of a move to get Paul George. Remember, they have the highest payroll in history, so that's a hell of a thing they'd have to do to even get him. So I think realistically, one way or another, no matter when it happens, I see Paul George being in a Laker jersey by 2018. And those are my thoughts on the Paul George fire sale. I'd love to know what you guys think. Where do you think he's gonna go? Where do you think he fits best? And do you think he's going to make it to the season actually playing for the Pacers? That would be pretty hilarious to see, because the fact that he already told the team he was leaving, I really couldn't imagine him playing for the Pacers this year, getting booed by the home crowd every single game because he said he's leaving. So I don't know if I see that happening, but let me know if you do. Also, make sure you hit like and subscribe and press the bell next to my name if you want notifications on my future videos. I'm Dom2K, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.